That night, a 12-year-old boy sat beside the fire listening to his grandfather sing. Not a lullaby. It was a long song, lasting almost the entire night, telling the story of a journey across a desert the boy himself had never set foot in. Every verse mentioned a rock shaped like a snake's head, a sand dune that always changed its shape after the rain, a dry riverbed where, if you dug 3 handspans down, you would find water. The boy didn't know he was memorizing an entire map of survival. He only thought he was listening to a good story before going to sleep. 30,000 years ago, there were no books, no maps, not a single written word anywhere on Earth. But there still had to be some way for a child like that boy to know exactly which fruit would kill you if you ate it, in which season the reindeer herd would cross the valley, and which path led to the only water source in hundreds of kilometers of dry land. Get one detail wrong, and his entire tribe might not survive the next dry season. You might think it was simply passed down by word of mouth. The grandfather told the father told the son, and so on, with the information gradually becoming distorted over time, just like the game of telephone that every child has played. But if that boy's grandfather happened to forget one line or change one name, the entire tribe behind him would truly get lost, in a real desert, not in a harmless game. So this wasn't something people could tell however they wanted. It was a system guarded as strictly as a treasure, and the grandfather was teaching his grandson how to become the next keeper of that treasure. The boy didn't memorize every word mechanically. His grandfather taught him to walk, literally. Each part of the song was tied to an imaginary step, a specific image appearing in his mind, a rock, a sand dune, a riverbed, in exactly the order he would encounter them if he actually walked that path. The brain of a 12-year-old child isn't very good at remembering a dry, disconnected list, but it is remarkably good at remembering a path it has traveled before, even if it only traveled it in imagination while sitting beside a fire. His ancestors long before him had discovered this without anyone ever explaining to them how the brain worked. They only knew it worked, and that was enough. Somewhere else in the world, thousands of kilometers away and perhaps thousands of years later, there were tribes that built enormous stone circles in the middle of open fields. People often imagine they were observatories for the stars, or some mysterious puzzle waiting to be solved. But to the people who lived there, each stone was simply a stopping point on a learning journey. The teacher led the students around the circle, stopping at each stone to tell a different story. Here, they talked about which leaves could stop bleeding when placed on a wound. There, they talked about the tribe's rules, who could marry whom, and who was forbidden from entering another clan's hunting grounds. By the time they had walked the entire stone circle, a child had reviewed nearly everything the community needed to know to survive another season. Not everyone was allowed to stand there and tell stories to others. A boy who wanted to become the keeper of these stories had to go through a coming-of-age ritual, sometimes lasting for days, sometimes painful, to prove he was serious enough for the responsibility entrusted to him. And even after completing that ritual, every time he sang his song before the entire community, the elders still sat there listening to every line, ready to interrupt immediately if he missed a beat, changed a name, or left out a detail. This was not a story told freely in the darkness, where you could add or remove whatever you wanted. It was a living book, with guardians, with people correcting mistakes on the spot, in front of everyone. Some nights, the grandfather didn't sing stories. He sat carving small marks into a piece of bone, counting the days since the last full moon, counting the number of animals the group had hunted that season. There were no words, no rhythm, only neat rows of carved marks, as clear as a notebook. For things that had to be absolutely precise, the number of days, the quantities, the numbers that allowed no margin for error, people did not rely on songs or vague memory. They relied on their own hands and a piece of bone, something that tens of thousands of years later people would still dig out of the ground, with the carved marks still lined up as neatly as the day they were first made. Then one night, the boy asked his grandfather, "What if I forget part of it?" His grandfather didn't answer right away. He made the boy sing it again from the beginning, slowly, correcting every place where he stumbled, as patiently as if he had the whole night to do it. And in fact, he did. Then he spoke, almost in a whisper, his voice growing much deeper. "You are not singing for yourself. You are singing for children who have not yet been born, children who will walk this path when both you and I have long since become dust." The boy didn't fully understand what those words meant at the time. He only knew that the next night and the night after that, his grandfather patiently made him repeat it, one section at a time, until there wasn't a single place where he stumbled. Not because his grandfather was strict, but because he knew better than anyone else that once he was no longer sitting here beside this fire, that song would exist in only one living mind, the boy's. There would be no second copy stored anywhere else in case the boy forgot. That sentence turned out to be the entire secret behind all of this. Humans have existed on Earth for nearly 300,000 years. Writing appeared only about 5,000 years ago, an incredibly brief moment compared with that entire span. That means that for almost all of human history, not a single book existed. No backup copy existed beyond the living memory of people like the boy's grandfather. If an elder died before passing on his song to someone else, an entire survival route, an entire body of knowledge accumulated by the tribe would disappear forever, leaving no trace behind. And this is the part that makes this story much bigger than simple curiosity about the distant past. Today, you don't need to remember the way home through a song that lasts all night. You have maps on your phone, and you have Google to look up anything in just a few seconds, without waiting, without anyone teaching you strictly beside a fire. But what you are quietly trading away is the very kind of memory your ancestors once possessed, the kind of memory capable of preserving a story perfectly across hundreds of generations, so that some 12-year-old child, somewhere you have never been, would still know exactly how to find water in the middle of a barren desert. That boy eventually grew up. Then one day he sat beside the fire himself, singing the very same song his grandfather had once sung, to another child sitting there listening, eyes wide with curiosity, believing it was nothing more than a good bedtime story. That child had no idea that what had just been passed on was an entire living map, wrapped inside a song that had quietly traveled through tens of thousands of years, across countless nights beside fires just like this one, only to reach that child at that very moment.